So the layer stack in Storyboard Pro works a lot like how layers in Photoshop and other drawing programs work. You select a layer to draw on it. You can click and drag to rearrange your layers. Each layer has this eyeball icon to hide or show the layer. And you can click the lock icon on a layer to lock it and prevent accidentally drawing on it or modifying it. Also, if you have a layer selected, you can come up here and change its opacity. And if you right-click, among the options here, you can rename the layer. And you can also right-click and delete a layer, or use the delete icon along the bottom. Now, something different about Storyboard Pro compared to other programs is that if you look down here, you have options to create either a new vector layer or a new bitmap layer. So what's the difference? Well, the core difference between bitmap and vector art is that bitmap art is made up of pixels, whereas vector art is made up of shapes defined by mathematical points and curves. If I use the contour editor tool here, I can see the curve that makes up this shape. This means that no matter how much you zoom in or scale up a piece of vector art, it will always stay clean and sharp. Whereas if you scale up bitmap art too much, it will start to get blurry or pixelated. However, both have advantages and disadvantages. Using the brush tool on a vector layer gives you sharp, individual strokes that you can select and modify after the fact. But with a bitmap layer, the brushes will be better at replicating the look of traditional drawing and painting. We'll be going over the specifics of these drawing tools in another video. Another thing to be aware of is that on a vector layer, there's no size limit. You can draw as far outside the camera as you want. But on a bitmap layer, you have a limited canvas to draw on, indicated by this blue dotted line. Large bitmap canvases take a lot of memory and will increase your project file size. So by default, the bitmap canvas is set to just 200% the resolution of the camera view. You can change that by right-clicking on a bitmap layer and choosing Change Bitmap Layer Resolution. Then in this window, we have a few different ways to change the resolution. You can increase it as a percentage of the camera view, so we could make it 300%. Or we could set a specific resolution here. You can also see it increase the area we have available to draw in. Or instead of that, we could also increase the pixel density, which gives us a higher resolution but doesn't increase its size as a percentage of the camera viewport. See, our blue dotted line didn't increase in size. It just crammed more pixels into that same space. Most of the time, the default bitmap layer size should be fine. But the real reason you might want to change it is if you have a camera move. Remember how we would block out areas of our storyboard templates so we could show long pans? Well, this is kind of the same thing. We could uncheck this padlock, which lets us change the width without changing the height along with it, and then make the bitmap layer 400% wide. Then, once we get to the lessons on the camera tool, we could create a camera move that pans across this whole area. So that's a special individual case. But if you did want to change the default bitmap size, you could either do it in the project properties by going to Storyboard Properties and change the defaults just for this project, or you could also change it in the overall program preferences under Storyboard Pro Preferences and Project Preferences. Whether you want to use bitmap or vector layers is mostly a matter of your preference and the style of board you're going for. One last thing to note about the two layer types is that you can convert between them. If you right-click on this vector layer, I have the option to convert to bitmap. It will let you choose the size and warn you if any of the vector art will get cropped off when it creates that bitmap canvas space. The main reason you'd probably want to convert a bitmap layer is that there are special effects that only work on bitmap layers. But more on those later. And if you right-click on a bitmap layer, you can convert to vector layer, though all it's actually going to do is create a vector shape with your bitmap image data as its fill. Now there are just a couple more important basic layer functions to go over. You can shift-click to select multiple layers, and use the right-click menu to merge them together. And a really important thing you can do is you can select layers and use this folder button to create a group. You can also just drag layers into a group after it's created. This is a great way to stay organized, and it will be important later once we get into animating layers and 3D layers. And lastly, by default, when you make a new panel, you get a background layer called BG and a layer named A, both of them vector layers. But if you come up with a different set of layers that you like, for example, let's make a vector layer for the characters' lines and a bitmap layer for their tones, and put those in a group, and then just have a single background layer, we can come up to Layer, Set Layer Layout as Default, and now whenever we create a new panel, it will give us a set of layers like that instead. That's it for the drawing layers. Now that we understand those a little better, let's look at the tools we're going to use to draw on those layers. We'll look at the basic drawing tools in the next video, starting with the color picker. I'll see you there.